In 2 weeks, the house was changed to a gas flame, azure and yellow. There were new pictures and prints in all the corridors and rooms. Christina had spent 2 or 3 days in the city choosing blueberry and primrose curtains. The contact with people of whom the photo hunter had been the herald hardened and revived her. At length, she was ready to withdraw again into her mental vase of music, books, and television. Outside, the world stayed obdurately white, the lake shiny black beneath the ice. Christina had had the berries stripped off all the bushes. Christina had almost finished her novel, the first part of which she had limpidly and easily rewritten. She sat working on the reupholstered couch, her back supported by flaxen cushions. The television fluted faintly in the corner of the room. Something about the picture summoned Christina's attention, and she looked up. Snow had filled the screen. It was utterly white. Christina frowned. She was about to press the adjustment control when the whiteness opened out into a petal, and so into a single flower, and then the camera sprang back to reveal a dressed girl in white and holding the white flower. She bowed low, and her long black hair, smooth as poured ink, fell forward to the ground. Christina sat bolt upright, and her writing smacked on the carpet. Without knowing what she did, she turned up the volume. "And here is Snowdrop," said the voice of the television, "one of the stars of the circus." The girl wore a short white costume and white tights that covered her from neck to toe to wrist, but described every inch of her young pliancy. The whiteness was coruscated by spangles. When she sprang suddenly over in a somersault, she glittered like a firework, and her hair sprayed out in fantastic smoke. 7 small figures ran across the space, which seemed to be that of a large arena. They wore red and black. Christina thought they were children, but their thick dark hair, muscular faces and forearms enlightened her. They were dwarves. They formed a pyramid and tumbled down, rolling expertly to the white satin feet of the girl called Snowdrop. She then arched over backward, making a hoop, and they trotted in a train under her. Next they lifted her up and raced along carrying her, in the way ants carry a leaf. There was a familial resemblance. Christina wondered if Snowdrop was related to the dwarfs. Although perfectly proportioned, she was very slight and petite. She looked about 14 years old. The dwarfs set Snowdrop down. She uncoiled herself up into a cross-legged snake, while her 7 companions bounced into a position about her. In tableau, the dwarfs grinned. They had poised, good-looking faces and seemed quite composed and happy with their lot. The girl also smiled. This image was replaced by a garnished sign, the fiery neon of the circus, which was performing in the city. Snowdrop and the dwarfs were to be seen every night. The television reverted to a rather sedentary play. Christina switched it off. She walked uneasily about the room, feeling a strange, excited dread. It was as if she herself had conjured up Snowdrop in the mirror of the television, as if, by breaking and burning Snowdrop's image, she, Christina, who had never wanted children, had given Snowdrop life, for Snowdrop was the artist's unborn daughter, correct in each detail, even to her pale red mouth. Every evening, for several nights, the same advertisement came on the television, and Christina watched it. Sometimes other circus acts were shown as well, a man who swallowed clocks, a woman who danced extravagantly on the head of a pole. But Snowdrop was always there, bowing, somersaulting, making herself into an arch, being carried by the ant-like dwarfs, sitting in their midst. Beyond her name, which was probably false anyway, no information was given. It seemed to Christina that a net had been cast for her, and that slowly she was being pulled into a snowy shore. It was useless to dissemble. She knew she would eventually go to the city, to the circus. There was even a vague fear that if she delayed too long, the circus might have moved on and she would have missed it. At last this fear got the better of her. An automatic hire car drove her along the frozen road, back into the icicled city, and delivered her at the entrance of the theatre, where the circus was resident. Christina took a gilded seat at the front of the auditorium. She was nervous, and as the spangled performers swung or pirouetted or leapt past, she imagined they stared recognizingly into her face with eyes as cruel as knives. When the moment came for Snowdrop's act with the 7 dwarfs, Christina was trembling, and she took some large gulps from a golden flask. The dwarfs came springing out like 7 sable cats. Snowdrop appeared ethereally, wafted down on wires from the ceiling. She was dressed like a princess in a long alabaster gown and diamante tiara, but she peeled off the dress and wires to reveal her sequined second skin and turned a series of cartwheels. At each revolution she went by one of the dwarfs, who in turn began to cartwheel. The 8 forms twirled about each other until Christina was giddy and shut her eyes. When she opened them again, the dwarfs were busy raising a body mountain up which Snowdrop walked, and next they became a body sea on which she swam. The dwarfs made Snowdrop the axis of every pattern. They were landscapes over which she travelled, and buildings into which she went and from whose windows she looked out. By prancing off each other's shoulders, they made her seem to juggle them. The audience laughed and clapped, and at one point they became an animal, a dwarf for each leg, and 3 dwarfs composing a body, head, and waving tail. Snowdrop sat on its back as it cantered to and fro, at last rearing up and catapulting her away into a scintillant triple spin. Unlike all the other acts, neither the dwarfs nor Snowdrop seemed ever to glance into Christina's face. As they went through their plasticine antics, their eyes were fixed wide and brilliant and far away. Christina's nervousness gradually left her. She observed the acrobats with condescending interest. She began to want them to notice her. She wanted beautiful Snowdrop, white and black and red, to look at her, to know her. It was not possible realization should be only on one side. It occurred to Christina they were actually ignoring her, cutting her. But that was of course absurd. Finally there was a danse macabre, during which 3 of the dwarfs soon during which 3 of the dwarfs stood on each other to fashion a tall man, with whom Snowdrop waltzed. But Snowdrop grew dizzy and fell down and died. The dwarfs bore her to the center of the stage, where they described a funeral and buried her in their dark bodies. Then a spotlight sun shone on the mound, and a white shoot pierced up through the earth of dwarfs. Snowdrop dived in graceful slow motion up into the air and was reborn like her name flower, to great applause. As they bowed, Christina stared at them, the 7 handsome dwarfs and Snowdrop, but their faces were like enamel masks. When they darted off the stage, anger flushed through Christina, hotter than the vodka in her flask. Soon after, she was outside the theatre, standing back among some bare trees below the stage door, while across the street the hire car waited like an obedient ghost. A group of other people had also gathered here, and a number of children with autograph books. Artists emerged and were beaming and gracious. Presently the dwarfs came out all together in wonderful fake fur coats. They were jolly and teased the patrons and scared the children. In the street lamps their eyes were now wicked and wise. Long after they had gone, when the autograph hunters had become impatient and many drifted away, Snowdrop emerged. Unlike the dwarfs, she wore a skimpy black jacket and ankle boots. Her hair was done in a long plait. She spoke to her admirers solemnly and signed their books quickly like a thief. Christina watched and wondered what she would do, but when Snowdrop's fans had melted away, she walked directly down toward the trees. Christina stepped out as if on cue. "Hello, how are you? Perhaps you remember me?" Snowdrop did not seem startled, although she had halted at once. In fact, an immediate slyness was apparent, a vixenish glaze of evaluation passing over her eyes. Then she smiled without opening her mouth and shook her head. "Your mother," said Christina. She added patronizingly, "You would have been too young to recall." "I'm older than I look," said Snowdrop primly. Her voice was flat and unpolished, and the statement offered its own obscure meaning, redolent of something murky. "Well, would you like to see the house?" said Christina boldly. She had planned nothing, but the words came as simply as in one of her novels. "The house? Your house? Yes, naturally mine, and we can have some wine and perhaps dinner. The kitchen's fully automated." "That would be nice," said Snowdrop in her cheap little voice. Only the under-pavement heating must have kept her slim legs from the cold in that short skirt and those unsuitable boots. Christina walked across the road, and Snowdrop followed her neatly, docilely. Under the lamps, her face was exactly the face of the paintings, and her mouth had been lipsticked an even redder red. There was no one left by the stage door. The street was empty, and Christina did not think anyone had seen Snowdrop come with her to the car. She was glad, for after all Snowdrop was a little embarrassing. Yet, as the car drove them away into the countryside, Snowdrop's awful loveliness filled the atmosphere like a low buzzing. Christina felt the need to talk. She lied sumptuously. "Your mother was very fond of you. I haven't seen her for so long." Without protesting or overt cunning, Snowdrop announced, "I never knew my mother. I was brought up by the troop." "Are you close to them, the 7—" "Oh, they don't like me," said Snowdrop reasonably. The house glowed at them from across the lake, and when the car brought them to the door, extra lights flamed on in welcome. Christina could see Snowdrop was impressed. A nasty complacency had thinned her lips. They went into the living room. Here, where the watercolors had hung in such abundance, Snowdrop made a living sculpture. Christina tensed for the house to respond in some way. But when it did not, when no poltergeist activity of any sort took place, she decided that she had already exorcised the architecture. They drank a fresh yellow wine. Christina asked Snowdrop questions about her life, and rather to her surprise, Snowdrop responded without either reticence or verbosity. She laid out events in bleak rows before Christina. It was a sordid, unjoyful existence which Snowdrop led, out of all keeping with her looks. And it had made her mean and ordinary in spite of herself. She had not ascended to tragedy or grotesqueness, but plummeted to the mealy-mouthed and the dull. Only glints of acquisitiveness distinguished her, and it was obvious she reckoned she was getting something out of Christina. Otherwise, she dwelt in the shadow of the circus, and especially of the dwarfs. She was their slave, seeing to their laundry by hand, shopping for and cooking their meals on those occasions they demanded it. Christina suspected that Snowdrop was also their sexual toy, for that matter, almost anyone's maybe. There was a metallic fragrance of willingness which grew stronger as the wine left the decanter and filled their bodies. "Off stage, do you always plait your hair?" asked Christina. "Shall I undo it?" asked Snowdrop. "Yes, why not? I've got a marvelous comb that perfumes the hair. We can go upstairs. I'll show you my dresses. You might like to choose some." "They'd be a bit too big for you, but we can always have them retailored." They went up the stairs and along a passage where the artist's paintings had hung, and into Christina's dressing room. Christina threw open doors. "Look, that crimson silk would suit you. My husband bought it. I never wear red, and this black one with sparkles." With a studied unself-consciousness, Snowdrop slipped off her tawdry skirt and top and stood in faded underthings, dim pants and tights, and since she did not wear a brassiere, only a thin little cotton bodice to conceal her bosom. Her acrobat's body was perfect, firm, slim muscle, lightly padded by white satin, and the symmetrical rounded young breasts bobbing in their vest. She tried on the dresses greedily. Christina pinched in material to show how well they would suit Snowdrop, once they had been altered. From its case she brought the magic comb and switched it on. When it had heated up, she combed Snowdrop's amazingly long, tendrily hair. A scent of warm roses, jasmine and cinnamon throbbed in the room. They drank more wine. "There are some gorgeous underclothes too," said Christina. "I never use them." She opened the drawers and let fall a shower of black and white silk corsets, black stockings sewn with orchids, garters of crow lace with silver buckles. With no apparent modesty or reluctance, Snowdrop pulled off her drab tights and pants, and up over her delicate head in a whirlwind of hair went the inadequate bosom bodice. She sat on a chair and drew the embroidered stockings along her dainty legs and fixed on the garters. She flexed her thighs, and her firm, curved stomach moved. Her breasts quivered like smooth white birds. Christiana assisted her into the black corset shot with ivory silk. She fitted it around the swaying stem of body and tilted into the bone cups the birds of the breasts, so the candy pink tip of a nipple rose just above each frill. Christiana laced up the corset severely. You must wear it tight.